Welcome to this episode of ArtsAbly in Conversation. My name is Diane Collin. This series presents artists, academics, and project leaders who dedicate their time and energy to a better accessibility for people with disabilities in the arts. You can find more of these conversations on our website, artsably.com, which is spelled artsably.com. Today, ArtsAbly is in conversation with Gift Tshuma, who is a disability rights activist and a musician, a singer-songwriter, and a producer focusing on emerging music technology development and collaborative practice. You can find the resources mentioned by Gift Tshuma during this episode on ArtsAbly's website in the blog section. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this new episode of ArtsAbly in Conversation. Today, I am with Gift Tshuma, who is a disability rights activist and also a musician, a singer-songwriter, and a producer focusing on emerging music technology development and collaborative practices. Gift, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being there today.
Yes.
Okay, so I know we know each other from other projects and other networks.
Yes.
So I know you're doing a fantastic work in trying to blur the boundaries, for example, which is one of your projects. We're gonna
Yeah.
probably talk about that. But before knowing a little bit about you, can you first of all present yourself and also
Yes.
tell us a little bit more about your background, where do you come from, your story?
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm Gift Tshuma, and I am someone with a physical disability. I'm a wheelchair user. I use a power wheelchair, and I am African, Black African, born in Zimbabwe. I've been basically involved within the music art scene ever since I was a kid. I would say ever since I was 10 years old. Mm, I was involved within music group choirs, bands, and yeah, I just never stopped ever since. So it's been quite a fun, exciting journey ever since.
Okay. And so when did you arrive in Canada and what happened from the moment you arrived in Canada and music studies or other
Right.
studies?
Yeah, so I arrived in Canada in 2001. And I was 12 years old at the time. So I was pretty young, and I'd already been involved in gospel music in my home country in Zimbabwe. And I immediately immersed myself into the gospel scene in Montreal. So I moved to Montreal when I moved to Canada. And I was involved in quite a few music groups for about 10 years. The first 10 years I was here. And then I later decided to start my own choir, my own gospel choir called United Tribulation Choir. And yeah, and that choir existed for about 14 years. It included particularly 10 musicians and 10 vocalists. So it was a 20 member group. Yeah, just loved gospel music because it's all about telling a story and it's all about encouraging people where they are. And that's why I always gravitated towards singing gospel music because it just was able to elevate me in a way I didn't experience singing other genres. And then in terms of education, I never formally studied music or anything like that. I grew up in a Black church, and in those kinds of churches, you learn as you go. You learn by ear. There's no formal like musical educational practice that you do. You just watch and learn, and you basically imitate. You mimic. You mimic as you go. So, being part of the children's choir when I was young, um, like I was taught how to harmonize any part, whether it's tenor, alto, or bass. So you had to know everyone else's part in case someone else doesn't show up for the concert. Uh, so with that, my ear became really good. I am not pitch perfect, but I'm pretty close. My ear became really good, and yeah, and my musical abilities just increased and expanded over the years, building on what I had. And then I took formal vocal classes. I was under vocal coach. His name is Cosimo Opedisano. He's a classical vocalist and very well known in Montreal. And I was under his leadership for some time vocally. And then I was in another vocal coach for gospel under the direction of Jennifer Mead. And through that, I was given the opportunity to meet Oliver Jones, the jazz pianist, uh, who's world renowned, and he was like my mentor for quite a bit throughout that time. Yeah,
Did you play the harmonica too?
I did. I always tried to keep that a secret.
Sorry.
Yes, I did play the harmonica for quite a long time. I played it for 12 years. So even when I moved to Canada, I would either be a vocalist in a band or a harmonica player in the band. And I learned that by ear, actually. And I was very much inspired by Stevie Wonder. Because I just really liked the way he played harmonica, how much soul was infused within harmonica. Because it's pretty hard to, it's a hard instrument to play to make it sound soulful. Because it's that kind of instrument that you hear mostly in blues or like folk music. You don't hear it within soul R&B as much. So I was really intrigued by that, how he's able to get that sound and that emotion out of the harmonica. So my obsession, that's where it kind of started. It started at 7 years old, and my mother actually bought me this tiny um, harmonica that only had the C scale on it, and I practiced that. And then when I was a teenager, I was able to raise the few, piggy banks that I had, and was able to buy a chromatic harmonica, which is kind of like my introduction into like the pro, into the pro instrument, and yeah.
When did you start touching digital instruments?
Ooh, digital instruments, I started touching them, I'll say I was 14. Because at that time, our the way I was looking at musical creation was within a very limited view. So I thought like, why not see what's out there within the digital world? So that whenever I do start my own band, um, people can actually play my compositions the way I want them to be played. So I was 14, and my first introduction was to Fruity Loops. I don't know if many of
Yes.
you remember Fruity Loops, but that was my first introduction to digital instruments of like, making beats through Fruity Loops. And then I was later introduced to Ableton. And then I moved away from Windows. I became bougie and then started using softwares like Logic and other fancy softwares like Melodyne and such, and Digital Performer.
So with that shift to more and more digital, I would say improvements in the digital world,
Mhm.
I think at a certain point you were thinking of creating your own instrument. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah. So that started a little bit later. I'd say that started in 2018 in terms of like creating my own instrument, but in terms of like having my compositions played accurately the way I envisioned them, what I did is I created music using MIDI. And I would use Melodyne for pitch correction and sing and basically sing the bass line, sing the guitar line, kind of like scat singing. So I'd scat my bass line, guitar line and piano. I have it in the MIDI form and have, those who are sight readers have it on Sibelius. And I was able to kind of like have that presented to my musicians. So that was like my way of like trying to get, my compositions to be played the way they should be played. And then to create my own instrument actually was inspired by a YouTube video I came across of John Kelly. John Kelly is a fantastic artist based in the UK, and he had his first edition of the Telecaster, and I was just fascinated. I was like, wow, like he's actually able to play an instrument of his dreams without any boundaries. And this led to meeting my friend Charles Matthews, who is a programmer, a software engineer, and an artist as well. And we talked about John, and it so happened that he was the one who developed the Telecaster alongside John. And it was like, whoa, like I'm meeting the guy who was part of this amazing creation. And yeah, and then that's where kind of blurring the boundaries was created, was birthed, is that I was like, "Look, why don't we start an organization that works on creating accessible digital instruments as well as physical instruments?" And that's kind of like where blowing the boundaries began. And here we are.
And so this was between the UK and Canada, and you were
Mhm.
able to create these bridges between several, not only countries, but several organizations or several artists.
Yes, yes. The internet is a good thing. And yeah, so like when I connected with Charles, it happened that he was in Montreal visiting, and we were able to connect. And then a year later, we launched Blurring the Boundaries, and we actually launched it in the UK, and we invited quite a few artists in the UK to come on out and to see what we have in mind and all that. And then we all just stayed in contact and kept in touch with each other's projects. And yeah, then I met colleagues here in Canada, like Adam Bell and Jason Nolan and Kurt. Um, then yeah, basically that's how the circle of life happened.
I think David Bobier was there too, right?
David Bobier was there too. So Charles is the one who introduced me to David Bobier. And then the three of us, we were the ones who began blurring the boundaries and to what it is right now.
Did you go to the UK to meet these people in person?
Yes, we did. We did. So we had kind of like a jam, like hackathon session that spanned a week. Um, Kind of like going there, tinkering in the lab and playing with different things and kind of like blurring the boundaries of like what's possible, right? Because oftentimes when it comes to uh, to creativity when it comes to innovation, there's usually like boundaries that are set. There's usually limits that are imposed on you. And the very basis of learning the boundaries is that we push those limits. And how do we do that? Well, we make something with the lens of universal design that nothing can be off limits and everything can be configured to someone's specific needs. So that's how it came to be.
Was Drake Music involved in that?
So Drake Music was involved in inviting some of their community members to our launch session. So we had our launch at Grey Eye Theatre at Drake Music in the UK. We had quite a huge turnout, and actually Adam Bell was one of the audience people there who attended. Yeah,
So lucky. I'm so
I
envious right now.
I have to say I am. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Hmm.
And so now you're not in Montreal anymore.
Now I'm not in Montreal. I'm in Mississauga. Yeah, I'm in Ontario now.
Are you creating new projects?
Yes, always, always. So right now I am in two projects. I'm one with Cammon Project and with Farm Project, which is a collaboration with York University and Western. And it's a grant that's basically focusing on amplifying artists with disabilities, their creativeness, and yeah, and creating basically anti-ableist practice within the arts. That's essentially where these projects are coming into play. And um, so one of the things that I'm working on is a podcast called Rhythms of Access, which will be coming out in the next 2 months. And this is where I'm going to be interviewing guests across the globe, guests who are artists. Primarily, I'm focusing on like musicians and singers, just to talk about their work, to talk about their creative process. What process do they take? How do they come to creating what they want? And what barriers do they experience within that creative process? And them sharing what things have worked for them within that process and what hasn't. So it's basically to create this space where people who are trying to get into the art scene, whatever that may look like for them, they could be encouraged and inspired to pursue their dreams and to think beyond the boundaries that have already been set by the art industry at large, the pop culture art industry that's usually exclusive.
As a disability rights activist, it's not your
Mhm.
first podcast, right? You already had some podcasts before. You
I
co-hosted.
have,
Yeah.
I've co-hosted quite a few. I've never like had one where it's just me, the host. So this one is the first. So I've co-hosted a few, and it's been largely due to the fact that I was bored. It was COVID. COVID, when COVID hit, a lot of my artistic, you know, events stopped um, for quite a while. And I was like, what better way than to have conversations with people about different things? So one of the podcasts was focusing on like racial issues and disability. And the other one was focusing on ableism within the healthcare system around during COVID time. So those were kind of like the themes that I was focusing on during that time.
So today, with all these projects that are here and also collaborations, I guess you're really working in so what I call disability arts,
Hmm.
which is really connecting with other colleagues. We met like that, actually. We
Yeah.
met through Camin. I'm also
Yeah.
at York University, so it's multiple connections, but all these connections coming together. This is this
Hmm.
community of artists that we build. So
Mm.
what does it mean for you to work in that environment?
It's empowering, and it's humbling. It's very humbling, because I I'm an activist first and then an artist second. And I believe like there's a lot of power in having lots of voices, creating something beautiful, and being able to be in spaces where you're surrounded by extremely intelligent artists, extremely creative artists. It's really something that many people don't get the opportunity to experience. And what we experienced that weekend at the Relab, Diane, was very special. Um, and I just want like more communities around the globe to exist the way we did that weekend. I want people to actually create those moments, create those communities within their respective environments, so that they can lift each other up, encourage each other up, and support each other in projects. Because like when that happens, there is no there's no competition. There's a community, right?
Definitely.
And I think that's something that people, as artists, we should remember that like when we lift someone else up, we are also lifting ourselves up, and we are learning from that, right? And yeah.
In England, because disability arts, but also activism between people with disabilities in the social world started really earlier than in Canada or in the US. It was already here, but I'm talking really about the arts. Like the
Yes.
movements were really shaking the world and saying, we are artists. We also happen to be disabled, but we are artists
Yes.
before. And
Yes.
so in the UK, they are believing in that for a very long time and they
Yeah.
give money.
Yeah.
And this is a support of the idea that communities of artists can come.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know how we can do that in Canada, but
Hmm.
with all your experience of working with these communities and also working with UK and working with Canada to get some funding to do some projects,
Hmm.
how can we? Do you have an idea on that? How can we get more of these communities together?
First, laying the foundation of humility, right? Because I feel that there's always this intimidation. Someone mentioned this in our during that weekend at the relab that like if someone is not within the educational sector, within the arts, they feel that they're not an artist. And vice versa, those who are in the education sector, they feel that they're boxing themselves in um, because like yeah, because like the creative process functions a different way, right? Like so I think like what what should be understood is that creativity is creativity. Expression of art is expression of art, regardless of what environment you're in. And that art in education and within outside education can coexist. And creativity can happen, and it can happen in a beautiful way, whether it's in a formal setting or in an informal setting. And that was evident in that Cameron event that we did, where we had artists from all backgrounds coming together and just creating beautiful music. So I think the barrier needs to be broken between, you know, like education related artists and um, folks who are not part of the educational system.
And it's all about collaborative work anyway.
Exactly, 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 exactly. So that's where I would start. And when we look at the Camel Grant, for example, like Blurring the Boundaries is a standalone organization. We were able to partner with Western University and York. So that's just to show you that it is possible to collaborate even if you are all from different schools of thought.
Very good. And I really believe in what you say.
Mm,
I'm an academic, but I'm also, before not being an academic, I'm a musician, right? I'm a singer.
yeah,
I'm a
yeah,
voice teacher for children.
yeah,
So being an academic brought me something, gave
mm,
me some extra things, but it will never be more important than the other or something
mm,
like that.
mhm,
And I believe also in the power of music education,
mhm,
because by transmitting these to younger generation, then in the way we are transmitting it,
mhm,
they are becoming more open and they're becoming more um, this they are developing the spirit of collaboration that we try to transmit them.
mm, mm, absolutely.
Speaking of collaboration,
Yeah.
I wonder if you have um, someone you could think of in terms of inspiration or in terms of someone who was important for you in your career, in all your environments you worked in, who would, if you had one or two people or more to mention, who would it be and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was a kid, singing in choirs and such, my inspiration was Stevie Wonder. The reason why Stevie Wonder was my inspiration is because I didn't have anyone else that looked like me. That was closely looked like me, right? It's like he was a black man, and he has a disability, and I have a disability, and I'm a black man. And I'd never seen anyone else. Ray Charles was a bit too old for me to know his music, but Stevie Wonder was within like you know, my age of interest. So he was like the first inspiration that I was like interested in because I kind of like identified with like his experiences. I identified with his creative process. So he was my number one fan person for me. And then second, I'll say it's John Kelly. He's gonna kill me when I say this. Um, but John Kelly inspires me greatly. Again, he looks like me, an artist with a disability, who has also a heart for advocacy, right? So if you look at Stevie Wonder and John Kelly, both of their music talk about advocacy, activism, right? Like Stevie Wonder at the time was talking about racism and war that was going on around the world. And, John Kelly is talking about issues that are happening within the disability community in his music. And I'm an activist, and that really resonates with me a lot. And John Kelly's message is like, you know, be firm when you're doing advocacy work, but do it out of love, right? Do it out of love. Don't be too harsh, but be firm and out of love. And that really like speaks to me greatly. And um, I feel honored that like, he's my friend and I'm able to just pick up the phone and call him and be like, hey, John, like, how would you handle this? So yeah, those are my two.
Very nice. It's funny,
Mhm.
John Kelly. came back several times
Yes, yes,
in our conversations, but also with
exactly.
other guests. And I said, oh,
Yes,
John Kelly.
absolutely,
John Kelly, if you
absolutely,
hear that, we love you.
absolutely. We're a fan. We're a fan.
Okay, thank you so much
No
for this
problem.
conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish you all the best for your upcoming podcasts and
Thank
all the
you.
other projects that are coming that are very exciting.
Thank you so much.
And
Really
see you
appreciate it.
around.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me and for thinking of me. And I'm looking forward to see what else is to come with ArtsAbly and yeah, and to assist in any way I can.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And yeah, me too. I would love to
yeah,
assist in any way I can.
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, have a good day.
You too.
Bye.